frontal and parietal lobes are separated by the central sulcus. Anteriorly to this, the primary motor cortex is found. The frontal lobe and temporal lobe are separated by the Sylvian fissure. The primary regions of importance in the frontal lobe are the primary motor cortex, the premotor cortex, the frontal eye fields, Broca's area, and the prefrontal cortex. Let's take a closer look at the motor cortex. The motor cortex is the origin of the primary motor tract from the brain to the spinal cord, the corticospinal tract. The corticospinal tract fibers descend through the white matter and cross at the pyramidal decussation in the medulla. This results in the left side of the brain controlling the right side of the body, and vice versa. The homunculus is a superimposed diagram of body parts giving a graphical representation of what motor function is controlled by the underlying cortical motor strip. The homunculus can also be drawn for sensory function and overlaid upon the primary sensory cortex. One also can be drawn for the cerebellar cortex. With this anatomic knowledge, we can now review frontal clinical anatomic correlations. The prefrontal cortex and surrounding cortex, as well as the orbital frontal cortex, a region at the base of the frontal lobe above the orbits, are all involved in executive functions. These are cognitive processes we use to guide and control our behavior. Primarily, they refer to goal-oriented behaviors. Neurologically, they are characterized by focusing, concentrating, and regulating motor activity as well as sensory input. Executive functions include planning, initiating, maintaining, and self-checking. Planning refers to functions associated with developing an approach to a project or task and problem-solving to achieve the task. Initiating refers to activities associated with actualization of a task or a behavior. It refers to actually doing the work. Once a task has been started or role has been undertaken, functioning within that realm needs to be maintained and focus is required. Self-checking is assessment of goal-directed behaviors and task fulfillment, a useful introspective activity. The premotor cortex stores learned motor patterns for easy retrieval. An example might be negotiating stairs or other complex patterns of movement. The frontal eye fields are responsible for volitional eye movement. They conjugately move the eyes together toward the opposite hemisphere. Activity of the right frontal eye field would turn the eyes toward the left. When one side is damaged, in this instance the right hemisphere frontal eye field, the eyes can no longer effectively move to the left and are then deviated toward the right side. This then causes a right gaze preference. This is what we see in a stroke, a hemorrhage, or a mass with edema. The patient looks toward their lesion. However, in seizure, the active discharge of neurons activates the frontal eye field on the side of the seizure, causing the eyes to deviate away from the seizure focus. Broca's area in the frontal lobe coordinates speech production and couples it with language interpretation through Wernicke's area of the temporal lobe. These two connect via the arcuate fasciculus, a bundle of axons traversing the parietal lobe. Damage to this region in the dominant hemisphere results in Broca's aphasia, which is characterized by a hesitancy in the fluidity of speech, often with articles of speech missing, word substitutions, and difficulty repeating.